Share and Believe on BBC Radio Lincolnshire, 13 minutes past 10. Now, do you believe in the afterlife? It might be a strange question to be thrown at you on a Thursday morning, but there is a lot of talk about this at the moment, and it's partly been sparked by the former Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, saying that she definitely believes in ghosts. She wrote a whole newspaper article about it, and this is based on her time spent working on the hospital wards as a nurse. One of the stories is that she, as a trainee and a colleague, saw a 4-year-old girl wandering the ward looking for her mother, and they believed it was a ghost because there were only babies on the ward. And yeah, she's completely open-minded about it all and believes in the afterlife. Well, her saying that has led to a lot of other people sharing their experiences, like the journalist Carol Malone, who was on Channel 5's Jeremy Vine show.
I've seen my husband's father, and my husband's from Bosnia. When he was here when the war broke out in Bosnia, he was troubled by it. A lot of his friends were there, his family was there, and his father came. And it was funny because I had never met his father. His father had died long before I met Nino. And I woke up one night in the bedroom, and I saw this figure at the bottom of our bed sitting in a captain's chair. You know, they're kind of the round chairs with a pipe in his hand. And I woke up and I was sitting. I saw someone in the room last night. Nino said, "Describe it." And I did. He said, "That's my dad." I said, "A man was here. He was sitting in a captain's chair, which was kind of rounded like that, you know, with the things on." I said he had a waistcoat on. I could see that. And I said he had a pipe in his hand.
So, by her description of this vision, her partner identified that man as being his dad, and she'd never seen him. Well, what do you make of it? There are certainly many stories in Lincolnshire about spooky goings-on. Maybe part of it is our military history. Some believe that the spirits of the people who served and worked at our RAF bases are still there now, one of them being RAF Wickham-B. And we'll hear from someone about that in just a moment. Just haven't got that clip available at my fingertips. So instead we're going to go to Debbie, who is a hypnotherapist and trainer, and Debbie teaches people how to explore past life regression in Lincolnshire. Debbie, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, really, my first question is, do you think ghosts are real?
My personal belief is, yes, I do believe they're real. However, I also think we need to look with a sceptical mindset because I think there are lots of rational and logical explanations at the same time.
So, not everything people say you have to take on face value is what you're saying, but it doesn't rule out the fact that they might be real.
Absolutely, and I think we need to explore things, and I think what's fascinating is throughout time, through all different cultures, people have had these experiences, and it's through sharing those we can perhaps learn more about the world that we live in.
What experience do you have? Do you have any yourself?
I do, actually. So I think I was very lucky. I grew up in a family where the wider family told different ghost stories, and I had a few experiences growing up in my childhood. The most prominent one I remember was when I was about 13 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night, and there I saw a figure sat on the end of my bed. Just looked like a shadow. I've always been very logical and scientific, and I thought, I'm sleeping, I'm not fully awake. If I pull the covers up, the covers are going to move to me and it's going to prove there's nothing there. So I took a deep breath, yanked the covers, 1, 2, 3, pulled them up, and they didn't budge.
No way.
And this figure rose up and stood, and I ran downstairs as fast as I could, convinced myself that I had dreamt it.
Yeah.
The next night, the same thing happened. A figure stood at the side of my bed.
Well, we can have recurring dreams.
We can absolutely have recurring dreams. What also happened, however, is my mum started to notice some experiences in the house. When we were at school, nobody else was around. So, things like hearing voices, rumbles and knocks, which of course can be logical. They can be rational, things happening. Things like furniture being pulled across the floor. Lots of strange goings on.
Yeah, and these aren't isolated incidents, I will say. And the reason I bring that view is that as a Church of England priest, we do sometimes get asked about whether we can come around to a house and deal with whatever those people are experiencing. And I'm not going to say I've got a complete answer as to what I think these things are, where they come from. That's for another day, perhaps. But I've got that clip now from RAF Wickham-B. Let's hear that.
It's a place where many people died. It's a place that's associated with death. There are a couple of stories about ghostly presence on the airfield, one of which was about a WAAF, which is the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. During the war, this particular young lady was engaged to a member of air crew in Lancaster bomber, but unfortunately he was killed. There is a rumour that she haunts the control tower where she worked.
And so people, the skeptics, I think, Debbie, will say, well, when you want to believe something, all those programmes on the telly where they go and try to find the spooky goings-on, they're desperately wanting to hear a creak and go, oh, it's a ghost. How much of that can go on when we are firmly convinced that things are out there?
Well, I think we can have confirmation bias either way. Whether we're a believer, we're likely to then look for things that prove that there are things out there. Likewise, if we adamantly don't believe, we're also going to be looking for evidence all the time that things aren't there. So I'm not sure we can ever have a definitive answer, but it's about having that open dialogue and I think listening to people's experiences.
Yeah. Yours is a fascinating story because the presence that you experienced had some sort of weight to it, because I think we imagine ghosts, you can just stick your hand through them and they just waft about, but you're saying that they weighed down on the bed and you couldn't bring the duvet up.
Yeah, and I haven't got an answer for that. I'm sure there's somebody more scientific out there that might be able to give some explanation for that, but it did really shape my viewpoint on the world and it's left me more open-minded.
So you've obviously then been thinking about what happens when we die. What do you think?
So I think, I learn a lot of it from my clients. So I started off with my hypnotherapy career very, very clinical. But some of my clients had other ideas. And it was actually one gentleman that came to me who was going to have an MRI scan and was claustrophobic. And so I asked his mind to go back to the origin of the issue. And he went back to what he perceived to be a previous life. So all of a sudden he was speaking in an American accent, explaining his life as a greengrocer and how one day he was walking along the street, got hit in the head by a piece of scaffolding, and they perceived him to be dead. They laid him out in the living room, and after a few days they buried him, where he woke up, and he said there was a bell in my coffin, and I rang the bell, and luckily they got me out, but it left me with this overwhelming fear of being in a confined space.
Right.
Now, I can't say whether that really happened, whether it was a metaphor that his mind created.
Whether or he's seen it in a film.
Exactly. What it did, however, was have a profound effect on helping him to go and have that MRI scan successfully. And so I started to think, well, maybe there's more in this. And now I've worked with hundreds of people that have had those sorts of experiences. And what's fascinating is the parallels. So when guiding somebody through a past life experience, we go through the death, which can be a bit gruesome at times because history's been pretty horrible. And there tends to be this correlation of seeing a tunnel of light. Now, you also find that in people who have near-death experiences. They will often perceive a tunnel of light. And I've been around people who have been dying as well, who have noticed a light come in for them and have seen relatives coming to get them, and it's led them to a feeling of peace and safety. So I think there's massive correlations in different phenomena here.
Right. But again, I know the skeptics would be thinking that's because you always hear about that story and your brain is perhaps very active in unconscious ways and it's creating the familiar image that we all hear about with the tunnel of light. I'm being super skeptical, but you can understand why, Debbie. Just trying to cover all angles here. I clearly do believe as a priest that we have a soul which means that we are more than just cells, and that we have an origin and an end point. Actually, I don't know whether end is the right word, that there is the potential for our souls to live beyond our physical bodies, all of that. But I really struggle to get my head around things like past life. We've all been alive once before. I'm not sure about that. And I'm also not sure about people coming back. I don't know about that. But you think they probably do?
Well, I think there's a strong possibility of it. I'm going from personal experience, 2 occasions. One was when my grandma was very, very poorly in hospital. And now she had dementia, and she did talk a lot of things that didn't make sense. But all of a sudden she got a moment of clarity and she said, Debbie, I need to tell you something. Nobody else is going to believe me. But Grandad came for me yesterday, her husband, and he told me it was time to come. And I told him, no, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not ready. Today he came back and he brought my other relatives with me. They've asked me to come and I've said no. Now, the other situation was when one of my best friends, Karen, was dying in the hospice. And I got the privilege of supporting her for the last couple of weeks of her life through using hypnotherapy, energy-based work, talking to her, counselling her through that death experience. And towards the end, she had a very strong sense of family coming for her. And I must admit, when I was sat in that room, the atmosphere changed. It felt very calm, very peaceful and very loving.
Where are they coming from?
So I think that's going to be dependent on your belief system. So you might believe in heaven, you might believe in a spiritual realm. It might just be that we're consciousness and energy. Because, like you say, what is the soul? What is consciousness? And I think different people have got different ideas of that. But nobody quite knows.
It is fascinating. And I do like hearing the stories. And I think I do believe those that share their stories. I think there are very few that would just make something up just to be the centre of attention. I think if you believe you've had that experience, you believe you've had that experience. So if you want to share this morning with me, there'll be no judgment, if you like, just curiosity about what your take is on this. Is there an afterlife? Have you had any of these experiences? Debbie, you've done a really good job of explaining some of the stuff that goes on, but also in a measured way, because it's easy to get a bit carried away, isn't it? And it must be tempting to in the experiences that you come up against. Debbie Ison is a hypnotherapist and trainer in Lincolnshire. Thank you for coming in. The lines are open for you, 08000 665 949. Adam is in his Uber, he's listening, and he says, look, this is complete nonsense. There's no afterlife, no ghosts. When you're gone, you're gone. Anyone claiming they can speak to the dead on your behalf are fraudsters, says Adam. Thank you. Text 81333, put LN first in your message.